Greetings and welcome once again. I'm your host Harshit Sinha, returning with a fresh and thoughtful, provoking exploration of sustainable development. Over the past 2.5 months, we have examined each of 17 Sustainable Development Goals individually, reflecting on their global significance and real world implications and the role they play in shaping a more equitable future. Being today, we shift our lens towards a broader and more critical theme, looking beyond the Sustainable Development Goal and addressing sustainable and development. This approach invites us to reassess and expand the existing framework that currently guide global development discourse. While the SDGs remain a cornerstone of international exploration and policy, it's increasingly acknowledged that the current model may not be fully capture the complexity of the today's intervened challenges, ranging from climate instability and rising inequality to escalating ecological decline. The forthcoming discussion will therefore dwell into emerging an alternative perspective that transcends goal-based measurement. These evolving framework call for a deeper integration of environmental stewardship and social equity and inclusive economic progress, while also grounding the development model in locally relevant realities and adaptive approach. This transition seeks to narrow the divide between the theoretical ambitions and the practical transformation. By critically examining the limitation of the SDGs architecture, the dialogue aims to open space for innovative thinking and holistic solution. It underscores the urgency of pursuing transformative pathway that favors long-term resilience over the short-term output. Ultimately, our objective is to advance and development paradigms that respect planetary boundaries, uphold human dignity, and move us collectively towards a more just, inclusive, and sustainable world. Slide 2. Critical Assessment of SDG Framework. The Sustainable Development Goal, that is the SDG, established by the United Nations in 2015, represent an ambitious global agenda to address pressing challenges such as poverty, inequality, climate change, and environmental degradation by 2030. While the SDG framework has galvanized international cooperation and policy alignment, a critical assessment reveals several limitations that hinder its transformative potential. One of the major critiques lies in its universal applicability without adequately accounting for contextually disparity between the developed and the developing nation. While the global targets are necessary, then often overlook local realities leading to imbalanced implementation and superficial compliance. Moreover, the SDG tends to compartmentalize goals, which can create silos and reduce the effectiveness of integrated solutions. For instance, economic growth, that is SDG 8, may conflict the environmental sustainability, SDG 13, 14, and 15, if not approached historically. Another concern is a lack of robust accountability mechanism. While countries self-report progress, there is a limited enforcement or verification resulting in inconsistency, data quality, and the lack of comparability. Additionally, the framework tends to emphasize quantitative matrices, often neglecting the qualitative dimensions such as the community empowerment, governance, integrated and indigenous knowledge system. Furthermore, SDG framework largely operates within an existing economic paradigm and does not sufficiently challenge systematic issues such as overconsumption, extra activism, and global inequality. This limits its potential to drive structural changes towards true sustainability. In conclusion, while the SDG serves as a valuable blueprint, there is a pressing need to evolve the framework by embracing localized, integrated, and justice-oriented model that better reflects the complexity of global challenges. Slide 3. Growth-Centric Contradictions. The Sustainable Development Goal pledge to leave no one behind, yet they lean heavily on very engine continuous GDP growth that has historically driven ecological overshoot and social inequality. SDG aid explicitly champions sustained and even accelerated economic expansion, while a host of others goal that is eradication of poverty, better infrastructure, full employment implicitly assume ever rising output. These growth imperative embeds and structural contradiction. The framework seeks limitless throughput on a planet governed by biophysical ceilings. Empirical research shows that absolute decoupling of GDP from material use and greenhouse gas emission at the pace and scale required has never been achieved. Efficiency gains are typically neutralized by rebound effect and high-income countries outsource resource-intensive production to the global south, masking their true ecological footprint. Meanwhile, the world's poorest region, those most in need of development, face shrink carbon budget that growth-centric models rapidly exhaust. SDG attempts to square the circle with the notion of green growth, promising technology innovations and market instruments will enable expansion while staying within the planetary boundaries. Yet, green growth pathway rest on optimistic assumption about the large-scale carbon capture, unprecedented energy efficiency gain, and flawless circular economy, assumption that remains largely speculative. Absence enforceable cap on extraction and emission, the framework lacked mechanism to resolve the tension between the economic escalation and ecological integrity. Addressing these contradictions requires shifting emphasis from aggregate GDP to well-being oriented matrices, embracing sufficiency and prioritizing equitability resource distribution without converting its growth bias. The SDG agenda risks perpetuating the very crisis it seeks to cure. Slide 4. Power and Politics in SDG. The implementation of Sustainable Development Goal, that is SDG, is deeply amended in the layers of power and politics dynamic, which significantly influence their prioritization, interpretation, and execution across contexts. While the SDG are presented as a universal framework, their realization is far from neutral or uniform due to systematic inequality and political interest at multiple levels. At the global level, international power structure plays a decisive role in shaping SDG priorities. Wealthier nations and the multilateral institutions often influence agenda setting, funding allocations, and performance matrices, frequently align these with their own geopolitical and economic interests. This global politics economic creates imbalances that can marginalize the voice and needs of the global south. Institutionally entrenched systems within the countries reinforce unequal capacity to implement the SDGs. Nations with strong institutions and governance mechanisms are better positioned to integrate and monitor progress, while weaker systems struggles with the fragmentation, limited resources, and external dependencies. National politics further complicates SDG adoption. Domestic political agendas, electoral cycle, and elite interest often dictate which goals receive attention and funding. This leads to selective implementation, with government focusing on politically convenient targets rather than those most urgently needed. At local level, power relations determine whose voices are heard in shaping the SDG outcome. Marginalized communities, including indigenous people and women, are frequently excluded from decision-making process, undermining the equity and inclusivity. Thus, understanding the SDG through a political lens reveals the need for transformative change that addresses structural power imbalance and democratizes development process at all levels. Slide 5. Weak sustainability problem. The Sustainability Development Goal framework has been critiqued for implicit adopting a weak sustainability perspective, which assumes that different forms of capital economic, social, and natural are interchangeably. In this view, the depletion of the natural capital, such as the ecosystem or the biodiversity, can be offset by increasing in economic or the social capital like infrastructure or education. However, this substitutability assumption oversimplifies the complex and irreplaceable nature of many ecological systems. Natural capital includes resources and the services that are foundational to human survival and well-being, such as the clean air, fertile soil, and biodiversity. Unlike economic and the social capital, many capitals of natural capital are non-renewable or can reach reversible tipping point. For example, once a species becomes extinct or a coral reef collapses due to the ocean warming, no amount of financial investment or a technology innovation can restore the original ecosystem. Treating these forms of capital fungible fails to recognize such ecological limits. These weak sustainability strands embedded in the SDGs undermine long-term environmental integrity. It promotes policies and prioritizes the economic growth or social development at the cost of ecological resilience, assuming trade-offs can be managed indefinitely. In doing so, it neglects a precautionary principle and risk crossing planetary boundaries that sustain life on Earth. To truly achieve sustainability, a shift towards a strong sustainability is necessary, one that recognizes the natural capital as non-substitute and place ecological preservation at the core of development strategies. Without this shift, the SDG agenda may inadvertently perpetuate environmental degradation under the guise of the balanced progress. Slide 6. Alternative Framework 1. Strong Sustainability. The concept of strong sustainability offers a critical alternative to weak sustainability assumption embedded in the Sustainability Development Goals. At its core, strong sustainability contends that the natural capital, ecosystem, biodiversity, and environmental function possess unique and irreplaceable value that cannot be substituted by the economic or the social capital. It asserts that the environmental production must be foundational pillar upon which all other development activities reset. This framework positions environmental integrity as non-negotiable, recognizing that the human economies and societies are ultimately dependent on the health of the ecological system. Rather than treating natural as a resource to exploit it and replaced strong sustainability emphasis preserving critical natural capital, acknowledging planetary boundaries and ecological thresholds that cannot be crossed without the irreversible harm. In this model, social well-being is achieved by ensuring equitable access to environmental resources and the benefits derived from them, thereby addressing social justice and intergenerational equity. Unlike the growth-driven narrative of the SDGs, strong sustainability reframes economic activity to operate with the ecological constraint, limiting resource use and emission to level that ecosystem can generate and absorb. This approach challenges mainstream development paradigm by demanding systematic changes such as shifting from GDP-centric measures to well-being indicators promoting degrowth or post-growth model in a high-consumption society and amending ecological principles in governance. Ultimately, strong sustainability offers a more grounded and resilient framework for addressing global challenges demanding a rebalancing of the human priorities to ensure that the environmental protection is a precondition, not a consequences of sustainable development. Slide 7, Alternative Framework 2, Doughnut Economics. The Doughnut Economics, developed by the economist Kate Raworth, present a transformative framework for sustainable development that balances ecological sustainability with the social equity. Visually depicted as a Doughnut-shaped space, this model defines safe and just operating space for humanity bounded below by 12 social foundation and above by 9 planetary boundaries. The goal is to ensure that all people have access to life essentials such as food, healthcare, education, and equity without overshooting the Earth ecological limit. At the core of the Doughnut economy lies a rejection of GDP growth as the primary measure of progress. Instead, it emphasizes thriving within the limit, recognizing that infinity economic expansion is incompatible with the planet's finite resources. The model introduced one safe operating space which lies between the ecological ceiling, that is the planetary boundaries like climate change and biodiversity loss, and the social foundation, that is basic human needs. Reaching either side leads to either environmental degradation or human devastation. Unlike the SDGs, which offers compartmentalize goal and tolerate trade-off between the environmental and economic objective. Doughnut economics demands integrated system-level thinking. It reframes the economic as embedded within, not separate from society and the biosphere, placing sustainability and justice at the heart of the economic design. This approach offers a compelling roadmap for 21st century policy by promoting regenerative and distributive economic, reducing inequality and restoring ecosystem. In doing so, it challenges mainstream development paradigm and provides a holistic vision for achieving both ecological balance and human dignity within the planetary boundaries. Slide 8, Alternative Framework 3, Regrowth. The Regrowth or Degrowth framework offers a bold alternative to mainstream development paradigm by fundamentally questioning the pursuit of infinity economic growth. It advocates for planned and equitable downscaling of production and consumption in wealthy nations aimed at bringing human activity with the planetary boundaries while ensuring universal human well-being. Unlike the growth-based model, which often exceed the environmental thresholds, such as those outlined in the planetary boundaries framework, regrowth calls for rethinking prosperity beyond GDP. Empirically, the data shows that the world has already transgressed critically ecological thresholds, including the climate change, biodiversity loss, and the nitrogen cycle destruction. For example, CO2 concentration have exceeded the safe limit of 350 ppm and now approaches to 419 ppm, while the species extinction rate are over 100 per million species a year, far above the safe threshold of 10. These trends indicates that the current growth-centric model is ecological untenable. Regrowth promotes ecological sufficiency, redistribution of the wealth, and reduction of overconsumption, particularly in the global north. It also emphasizes localized economies, shorter work weeks, and investment in care, education, and community resilience. The aim is to enhance the quality of life while reducing environmental pressures. Scholars such as Guy Rogs Callis and Jason Hicketts argues that regrowth is essential for achieving climate justice, social equity, and ecological sustainability. As an alternative to both green growth and austerity, regrowth offers a coherent evidence-based response to the ecological crisis, urging a shift from extremism to regenerate a solid tree. Slide 9. Planetary Boundaries Framework. The Planetary Boundary Framework, developed by the team of Earth system scientists led to John Rockstrom and Willie Stephen, provide a science-based approach to define the ecological limit within which the humanity can safely operate. The framework identifies 9 key Earth system processes that regulates the stability and resilience of the planet and quantify the boundaries for each to prevent irreversible environmental change. As illustrated, several of these boundaries have already been breached. Climate change, for instance, has exceeded its safe boundary of 350 parts per million, that is ppm, of CO2, with the current concentration around 419 ppm. Biodiversity loss is occurring over 100 extinction per million species a year, far beyond the safe limit of 10, indicating a mass extinction trajectory. Nitrogen cycle dispersion is another critical concern, with about 150 teragram, that is Tg, of nitrogen removed annually from the atmosphere, more than the double the safe threshold of 62 Tg. Likewise, freshwater use has surpassed the safe level of 4,000 km cube per year, currently standing at an approximate 2,600 km cube per year. Land system change also passed its threshold, with only 62% of the original forest cover remaining compared to the 75% boundary. The significance of the framework lies in its shift from a growth-centric view to one that prioritizes the planetary stability. It underlines that reaching these limits may trigger off abrupt or irreversible environmental changes. The framework serves as a critical foundation for rethinking development strategies, emphasizing the sustainability must respect these ecological boundaries to ensure the viable future for humanity. Slide 10. Common but differentiated responsibility. The principle of common but differentiated responsibility, that is CBDR, is a cornerstone of international environmental law, particularly in climate change negotiation. First articulated in 1992, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, that is UNFCCC, CBDR acknowledged that while all nations share the responsibility to protect the environment, they do not bear equal obligation. This disparity arises from the historical difference in the contribution to environmental degradation and varying level of economic development. The attached chart illustrates these imbalances by comparing cumulative CO2 emission in billion tons. The United States and European Union, followed by China and Russia, exhibit disproportionately high historical emission. In contrast, regions such as like India, Latin America, and Africa have contributed significantly less to the climate crisis. This disparity underscored the ethical imperative behind CBDR. Nations that have historically benefited from the carbon-intensive development must shoulder a greater share of mitigation efforts and financial contribution. CBDR is not merely a moral stance but a pragmatic framework that seeks to ensure equity in the global climate governance. It enables developing countries to pursue sustainable development while holding industrialized nations accountable for their historical emission. These principles have informed landmark agreements such as the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement, where differentiated responsibilities and the capacities continue to guide negotiation. In conclusion, CBDR promotes climate justice by aligning global environmental goals with the principles of fairness and equity, recognizing the historical emission and economic capabilities is essential to building a truly inclusive and effective response to the climate crisis. Slide 11, Sustainable Consumption and Production. Sustainable consumption and production, that is SCP, is a key component of United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 12. It emphasizes the need to use natural resources efficiently, reduce waste, and ensure equitable access to goods and services for the current and the future generation. SCP lies at the heart of reconciling economic growth with the environmental sustainability and the social equity. The attached visual highlights the stark disparities in the global consumption pattern. The wealthiest 16% of the world population is responsible for an astonishing 49% of the total consumption related to carbon emission. In contrast, the poorest country, 1% of the global population, account for nearly 1% of the global consumption, yet contributes 17% of emission, largely due to inefficient system and the lack of access to cleaner technology. These figures underscore the disproportionate impact of affluent consumption habit on the climate change and resource depletion. Overconsumption in wealthier nations not only accelerates the environmental degradation but also marginalizes the vulnerable population who contributes the least yet suffers the most from the consequences. Addressing SCP requires systematic changes in production practice, corporate accountability, consumer behavior, and the policy framework. Solution includes promoting circular economy model, eco-design, ethical supply chain, and the public awareness campaigning focused sustainable lifestyle. SCP is not merely about reducing the consumption but also transforming our entire value system to prioritize the longevity, equity, and resilience. As a global citizen, adopting sustainable practices in everyday life is both a responsibility and powerful tool for driving inclusive, climate conscious, and the well-being economic indicator redefining the progress beyond GDP. Traditionally, measures like gross domestic product (GDP) have long been used to assess the national progress, yet they feel short in capturing the true well-being of people and the planet. The well-being economic seeks a shift this paradigm by focusing on humans' flourishing, equity, and environmental sustainability rather than mere economic output. The attached slide presents a range of alternative indicators that provide a more holistic picture of society progress. The first one is GDP per capita remains a baseline economic indicator, but it overlooks social disparity and environmental degradation. The next is the genuine progress indicator, that is GPI, adjusts economic measurement by accounting for environmental damage and income inequality, offering more accurate reflection of societal welfare. The happiness index evaluates subjective well-being based on the citizen's satisfaction, emphasizing mental and emotional health. The Gini coefficient measures income inequality, highlighting the economic disparity within the population. The ecological footprint assesses the human consumption in relation to Earth's biocapacity, flagging unsustainable resource use. The last one is the Human Development Index, that is HDI, combines life expectancy, education, and income to evaluate overall human development. These indicators collectively reflect a broader vision of progress, one that includes social equity, environmental integrity, and the long-term sustainability. Moving beyond the Sustainable Development Goal, they encourage policy framework that prioritize the quality of life over quantity of production. By integrating these indicators, nations can better align development with the true well-being of the people and the planet, fostering inclusive growth within the ecological limits. Localization and bioregional approaches. Localization and bioregionalism and emerging as a transformative framework in sustainable development, emphasizing ecological integrity, cultural relevance, and the community resilience. This approach focuses on aligning human system, governance, economics, and the social structure with the natural boundaries and capacity of specific regions. The first step in this approach is to identify bioregional boundaries, natural units such as watershed ecosystem and the climate zone that define in area's ecological region. Understanding the carrying capacity and the ecological function of these areas is crucial for sustainable planning. Next is it is essential to assess the local needs and the resources by examining the availability of the natural assets, human requirement, and the ecosystem services. This enables communities to identify opportunities for regenerative practice and circular resources use based on the local condition. Effective bioregional strategies requires the development of appropriate governance structure that operates at the biological scale rather than arbitrary political boundaries. These governance methods must be participatory and inclusive, integrating both human and non-human stakeholders in decision-making process. Lastly, implementing the bioregional economies involving relocalizing productions and consumption system. These reduces the ecological footprint, strengthening local resilience, and fosters community stewardship of the environment. Bioregional economies emphasize ecological restoration, pace-based education, and the development of the system that nurture both social and ecological well-being. In essence, localization and the bioregional approach offers a pathway to sustainability that respects the uniqueness of each region, foster ecological balance, and empower local communities to thrive within their natural limits. Implementation strategies for alternative framework. To shift towards a more equitable and sustainable future, the adoption of alternative development framework must be accompanied by robust implementation strategies. These strategies ensure that the systematic transformation are inclusive, resilient, and responsive to both environmental and societal change. The first is related with the multi-stakeholder governance that lies at the core of the effective implementation. It calls for inclusive governance model that engage civil society, indigenous community, the private sector, and the public institution. Beyond mere consultation, these approaches emphasizes genuine power sharing and participatory decision making. Such governance ensure diverse voices are represented and that the policies reflect collectively priorities and shared responsibility. Other one is related with the circular economic transition. That is another vital strategy. It involves redesigning production and consumption system to eliminate the waste, reduce resources and extraction, and regenerate natural system. The key enablers of this transition include innovative business model, strong policy framework, and the shift in consumer behavior. This strategy emphasizes keep product and material in circulation through reuse, repair, and recycling, thus decoupling economic growth from the environmental harm. The last one is related with the community-led initiative, which provides a bottom-up path to resilience and sustainability. These initiatives foster community ownership of resource, support local economic development, and promotes cooperative enterprises. They are particularly effective in addressing both social equity and environmental sustainability as they empower communities to design and implement solutions suited to their specific culture and ecological contexts. Summarizing, these three strategies offers a multidimensional approach to implementing the alternative framework, balancing top-down policy mechanism with the grassroots empowerment to achieve systematic and just sustainable transition. Well, this is the last slide, slide 15, key takeaway moving beyond SDGs. While the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal provides a globally recognized framework for addressing the critical global challenges, advancing sustainability in a rapidly changing world requires a moving beyond their limitation. This involves embracing deeper ecological wisdom, systematic transformation, and inclusive governance. The first step is to recognize the limit. Acknowledging the existence of absolute planetary boundaries is essential. These biophysical limits, such as those governing climate stability, biodiversity, and resource use, set non negotiable thresholds for human activity. Sustainability efforts must operate within these environmental constraints to preserve life supporting systems. Secondly, there is a need to address inequality. Historically, imbalances in resource consumption and environmental degradation must be confronted. High income countries and communities with a legacy of disproportionate contribution to global emission bear a greater responsibility for corrective action and the financial support. The third one is diversified model is a critical one size fit all approach to development is inadequate. Alternative framework, particularly those grounded in the local traditional, indigenous knowledge and ecological economics should be embraced. Moving beyond the Western centric paradigm allow for a plural context sensitivity solutions that are more culturally and environmentally appropriate. Finally, a true sustainability transition demands a systematic change. Incremental reforms are insufficient to meet the today's complex intersection crisis. Why what is needed is a transformative changes, overhauling institutions, rethinking economic systems, and restructuring power dynamic to achieve just an equitable outcome. In essence, moving beyond SDGs entail adopting a new paradigm that centers ecological integrity, social justice, and long-term resilience, opening pathway to a more inclusive and sustainable growth future. While this session concludes our thematic exploration of looking beyond the sustainable development goal, a deeper inquiry into the sustainability and development. Throughout this discussion, we examine the limitation of the SDG framework and emphasize the need for a broader transformative approach that transcends conventionally development matrices. By engaging with systematic thinking, ecological responsibility, and inclusive progress, we have laid a groundwork for a more nuanced understanding of sustainability development in 21st century. In the coming week, we shall continue to intellectual journey with another insightful discourse titled Building a Sustainable Future Concept and Approach, exploring foundational idea shaping global sustainability transition. We invite you to remain engaged with our channel for the upcoming session and to share this content with the fellow professionals who are passionate about advancing sustainable development. Until then, I wish you continued success in your professional endeavor, filled with the inspirational resilience and commitment to sustainable prosperity.